queremos ganhar dos monstros, temos que começar a agir como humanos.
Bem-vindos, seus babacas.
I'd like to start by asking you, Erin. Over the years, I feel like Annie has her perspective on what power means, what it comes from, how much of it is related to actual superpowers. It has shifted a lot, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that she sort of had to go through what the audience has had to, and that's kind of why we've often referred to her and Huey as the vehicles for the audience on the show to have that fresh perspective on this world that everyone else is not only used to, but like excessively used to the degree where this system that is external to these really power-drunk characters is so complicit with their own corruption that the question is like, who are the people that are really responsible here, right? So she has to define, I guess, she has to learn what others define as power. With I think a lot of women go through when they're sort of being introduced to these, not just women, but like these systems that sort of work and are geared towards perhaps elevating some and not others, whether it's explicit or not. You sort of learn what the public definition of power is versus what the literal definition of power is. And I think Annie is clinging to her own clinical definition of it, which is power is something that is not to be weaponized or utilized against anyone or for anyone's selfish and solipsistic mission, but it's meant to be used for the greater good. So she's kind of trying to not allow external forces to manipulate what her definition of power is. And I think it's increasingly difficult for her to not change her own definition, but to not become dejected by what she's observing.
Right. And what does that mean for her next season?
Oh boy. I mean, I feel like I feel like the question that a lot of us ask ourselves is how much change can we really impart? Like how much can we really do here before we're going to deplete ourselves, sacrifice ourselves at the mercy of a system that's like never going to change, right? And so that is like a fundamental question for a lot of the characters that are there in the show in a minority sort of way, that are there to do good, that are the ultimately most altruistic characters on the show. So I feel like she's continuing to have this constant inner battle that manifests externally, and she's just ultimately trying to do her best. But that's the big question, isn't it? It's like, how far do you go until you just completely sacrifice yourself at the mercy of this unwaveringly stubborn and corrupt system?
Over the seasons we got to see, I feel like as an audience, we got to go through with the characters, realizing how what the meaning of power changes, right? Because at first we're like, okay, superpowers, these are powerful people, and they undeniably are, but also they're so powerless so often, right? What does that mean for your characters next season? What does power mean to them? And is it different to what it meant last season?
For my guy, Homie, has always been the strongest physically, but I consider the weakest emotionally in the show. I think he's the weakest character in the show. And then in season 3, it was the first time when they ganged up on him. When Butcher got superpowers and Soldier Boy and Naked Huey pinned him down, and it was like, it could have been, that's the first time he's had to face mortality. And I think that has really embedded itself with him, and that's where we find these characters, all of them at the end of season 3. They're really, they're in very interesting places to launch into season 4. And I think, existential crisis that began in season 3 continues, as well as lots of other things. But yeah, it's a very interesting season for all of the characters, but for my guy as well.
Yeah.
What about the Deep? What does power mean to him?
Yeah, I think he's always felt so powerless. He's just sort of, right, I think he's just kind of disintegrates into himself so much that I think he's finally starting to realize he has more power then he kind of realizes, he kind of starts to tap into it a little bit in season 4 without giving, things away. But I really like the journey he goes on in season 4, and he's starting to kind of, tap into a bit of anger, So
A lot of fun.
it's a lot of fun.
Is season 4 is very entertaining.
You can't just say that.
Yes, I can. It's exactly all I can say.
They wrote it beautifully.
It's a tricky time to get It's a tricky time for you, but we can't say anything.
Come on.
Anthony, I've been meaning to ask you since last year when you said some people kind of misinterpret the point of the show and both your character. I was wondering, as an actor, once you noticed that, did it change the way you portray him at all? Because I know when I write something, I'm terrified of people misinterpreting it, and I'm constantly trying not to let that affect the way I do it. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. But just to clarify, I don't think, for me at least, I'm not sure. I can't remember what I've said, but it wasn't so much about the show, but it was more specifically about the character. And I think there was a moment when the character was misinterpreted by a small group of people, and we corrected that publicly. I think Eric tweeted about it, and so did I. And look, we're making a show where it's beyond my control how people interpret what we're doing. The majority of people understand it for what it is, and there's no way I would change what I'm doing based on audience reaction or a few people tweeting about it. I'm not. My performance and the way I do my job is not dictated by Twitter, whatever it is now that Musk has taken it over. X, yes. I don't even go on it anymore, but it's a dumpster fire. Anyway, moving on.
For Victoria, that for both us as an audience and for you as an actor, so many surprises with her, right? What was it like for you over your course on the show?
Over the entire thing?
Yeah, especially this season.
She's been fun. She's been a lot. There's been a lot of surprises. You're not wrong there. Definitely when I get a script, I'm like, we're doing this? Okay. But especially this season, I think Victoria Neuman has slowly been working towards kind of it actually came up in a conversation in a scene in season 3 between Annie and Neuman, and I'm going to butcher maybe you know it, I'm going to butcher the delivery here of the line, but it was like, essentially Neuman saying, work with me, like you and me, we can do it together. And Annie says, she's like, I'm sick of this.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like,
such bad memory.
no, I know. I love that moment. And she says, like, essentially Annie says, you're just going to end up on this steaming pile of shit, like in power, but what's it going to be worth? Like, it's just going to be corrupt people.
Right.
You're just going to be a part of that. And I think Neuman's journey on this show has really just kind of become more and more morally gray. Like, she very much has descended into this kind of corrupt, dark place. And I think she's done a lot of the things that she has out of necessity, or she's thought that they were going to lead to something better, but she's just digging herself deeper and deeper. And that's going to be something fun that we see this season too.
Yeah.
And Karen, I feel like this past season, Kimiko's scenes have been such a breath of fresh air, even though she has dealt with such heavy topics and themes. But also, I feel like she has musical numbers and themes of running away. And at the same time, it feels like a breath of fresh air, but also I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Do you have that feeling as well with your character? And what can you tell us about next season?
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. Season 3, we got to see Kimiko in a musical number. And to be honest, I feel like Kimiko lives in the darkness most of the time. And she never gets, humility. She doesn't have any of the funny lines. She's always living under this sort of like survival mode. And then we had the musical episode, which provided a pop of color. And I was super excited for that because I've never gotten to wear like light blue on the show. It's always all black. And we had a lot of fun with that sequence. But for season 4, we have a couple scenes in there that Frenchie is also in that provide like violence in Kimiko's true fashion, but also adds a little bit of color into it. So I'm excited for you guys to see that fight sequence.
Whoa.